Israel and Hamas have agreed to release 50 hostages held in Gaza during a 4-day pause in fighting.
As the civilian death toll in Ukraine surpasses 10,000, President Zelensky looks ahead to EU accession negotiations 10 years after the deadly Maidan Square protests.
The Dutch election is underway. Polls show 4 parties are neck and neck. Whoever they vote in will be the first new prime minister in 13 years.
The families of victims killed during the Troubles in Northern Ireland challenged the law granting amnesty to those allegedly responsible for deaths under investigation.
More than a month into Israel's war on Gaza, and the cabinet has approved a ceasefire deal that will see 50 hostages held by Hamas released, all women and children, during a 4-day pause in fighting. In return, around 150 Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails will also be freed. Ahead of the cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told reservists his government was committed to getting all of the hostages home. Later, his government said any pause in fighting did not mean the war was over.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל. כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו, אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה, ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו. לחסל את החמאס, להשיב את כל חטופינו ונעדרינו, ולהבטיח שבעזה לא יהיה שום גורם שמאיים על ישראל.
The pause allows for 308 trucks a day to enter Gaza, bringing vital food, medicine and fuel. Israel says the first hostages will be released Thursday, and the law will be extended by an additional day for every 10 hostages released. Netanyahu has been under increasing pressure from the families of the 240 hostages held captive by Hamas since October 7 to do more to get them home. Protesters have been on the streets each night calling on the Israeli government to negotiate a deal.
Addressing the faithful gathered here in St. Peter's Square for his Wednesday general audience, Pope Francis turned his thoughts to those who were suffering in wars around the world. In his appeal, he prayed for those who are suffering in Israel, Palestine and Ukraine. And he recalled meetings he had earlier today with relatives of Israeli hostages who are still kept by Hamas in Gaza, and Palestinian families who are suffering the consequences of the Israel-Hamas war. We know that, as described by the Holy See Press Office, those meetings were of an exclusively humanitarian nature. Pope Francis' aim was to express his spiritual closeness to those who are suffering. On a previous occasion, the pontiff said that anyone, any individual, whether Christian, Muslim or Jewish, is sacred and precious in the eyes of God. These are the words that Pope Francis used. And on another occasion, he also said that releasing all hostages is a crucial step to end conflict. He called for a ceasefire and said that a two-state solution was needed in order to achieve that. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews and the Vatican City.
A hospital on the front line in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region crumbling to pieces after a Russian missile strike on Tuesday. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, 1 person was killed and 8 people were injured. The United Nations says more than 10,000 civilians have been killed since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. This after President Volodymyr Zelensky held bilateral meetings with the head of the European Council, Charles Michel, and Moldova's leader, Maia Sandu, in Kyiv. Zelensky reiterated Ukraine's request to join the EU and is eyeing the EU's December summit for positive indications. The leaders also discussed security issues and the challenges both Kyiv and Chisinau face as winter approaches. Sandu, Zelensky and the First Lady Zelenska also marked the 10th anniversary of the Revolution of Divinity, commemorating the 100 lives lost in deadly clashes between security forces and protesters in Maidan Square in 2013. The mass protest ultimately led to the ousting of Kremlin-backed President Viktor Yanukovych and gave rise to a new generation of anti-corruption, pro-European movement leaders.
polls are open in the Dutch election. And even though people are still voting for their 150 members of parliament, one thing's for sure, they will have a new prime minister for the first time in 13 years. Former Prime Minister Mark Rutte is on the way out. Polls show 4 parties are neck and neck going into today's election, including Geert Wilders' far-right Party for Freedom. Wilders' Party for Freedom is slightly ahead of the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. If Wilders' party succeeds, it could mean a woman, the current Justice and Security Minister, takes the top office for the first time. She's the first Liberal politician to admit that she could form a coalition with the far right. There's also a heavyweight candidate on the left side of the political scene. That's Frans Timmermans, the former EU climate commissioner. He gave up his international career to return to politics. The election results are expected later tonight.
The families of victims who lost their lives to sectarian violence in Northern Ireland during the Troubles between the late 60s and 1998. They are taking legal action after a controversial law granting immunity to ex-British combatants involved in the conflict was approved in September. The new law has been fiercely criticised by all political parties in Northern Ireland and the Irish government. The Council of Europe has also expressed serious concerns.
My family's destroyed. You never get over losing. I'll never get over losing my husband. His family will never get over losing him. It doesn't go away. You live with it morning, noon and night. It's with you all the time.
UK government passed a law which denies us the rights of all the victims of a fair deal.
The new law calls for the creation of a Truth and Recovery Commission and offers amnesty to British security personnel and paramilitaries for their part if they cooperate with its inquiries. It will also limit ongoing criminal investigations from this time period. Human rights organisations say the move is a denial of justice. More than 3,500 people were killed during the conflict over British rule in Northern Ireland. Around 1,200 deaths remain under investigation.
After Poland's Liberal opposition coalition won a parliamentary majority, some hope controversial judicial changes introduced by the previous PiS party will now be overturned. Warsaw needs to have an independent judiciary in order to unfreeze European funds.
We didn't really feel the support of the European Union institutions, especially European Commission. But since 2019, 2020, they realized that the problem is big. Now we feel their support. There are milestones negotiated actually by the peace government. Most of those milestones concerns the repairment of the judiciary. We have worked on 5 bills that should repair what's been damaged within the judiciary in the last 8 years. And we hope that the new government will help us to help the society to make some repairs and changes for the better.
The first step to the depoliticization of the National Council of the Judiciary Parliament has already appointed new representatives to sit in the council.
Będziemy brać udział jako te osoby wybrane przez Parlament w pracach Rady. Będziemy patrzeć na ręce tym, którzy są już w tej Radzie z tej części sędziowskiej. I myślę, że to jest taki początek zmian, bo należy przede wszystkim zmienić ustawę o KRS-ie, tak żeby z powrotem sędziowie wybierali część sędziowską tego ciała, a nie politycy. Ale mamy głosy, dużo opinii, że należy ten proces jeszcze też zdemokratyzować.
Poland is set to receive more than €5 billion in financing to reduce their dependence on Russia, previously frozen due to prior actions from the outgoing nationalist government.
Fundusze powinny być uruchomione natychmiast, bo to wynika po prostu z prawa europejskiego. My od dawna o tym mówiliśmy, że przyczyny, dla których te fundusze są wstrzymywane, nie mają tak naprawdę charakteru prawnego, mają charakter wyłącznie polityczny. My się cieszymy z każdej decyzji, która przywraca stan zgodny z prawem. Stan zgodny z prawem jest taki, że Polska pieniądze otrzymuje. Mamy pierwsze decyzje, chociaż przecież z prawnego punktu widzenia nic się nie zmieniło i bardzo dobrze, dlatego że te pieniądze się po prostu Polakom należą.
Yesterday, the European Commission recommended the release of €5 billion for Poland. However, these are not funds that depend on changes in the Polish justice system. For this money, Poland will still have to wait and work. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Warsaw.
ChatGPT creator Sam Altman is back at the OpenAI as CEO. days after his shock dismissal plunged a pioneering artificial intelligence firm into crisis. Altman's exit on Friday triggered intense lobbying from OpenAI's biggest investors, including tech giant Microsoft, for his return. Earlier this week, Microsoft had announced they would hire Altman to lead an AI research team. It's invested billions of dollars into OpenAI, incorporating its tech into various products, including its search engine Bing.
It's been 60 years since one of the United States' most recognizable presidents was assassinated. President John F. Kennedy was shot as his motorcade drove through Dallas, Texas in 1963.
There's numerous people running up the hill.
Once in the back and once in the head. Kennedy died 30 minutes later of his injuries. The assassination led to a national outpouring of grief. Police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald, a U.S. Marine veteran. Oswald was then later shot. Before his death, he denied killing the former president.